Kyle Sielaff joins the show to discuss the Marlins 2025 season.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Marlins. I'm your host, Jeremiah Geiger. I'm a diehard Marlins fan, and I've podcasted about the team for the last 4 seasons. You can find me on Twitter at Jeremiah Geiger too, and thank you for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Make sure you hit subscribe on the YouTube channel, leave a like, leave a comment, all that good stuff. And joining me on the show today is Marlins play-by-play TV announcer Kyle Sielaff. Kyle, welcome into the show.
Thank you, Jeremiah. It's great to be here with you, man. And congratulations to you on all of your success as well. I know you're like many of us. You're a huge fan, and you've found your little avenue to, I guess, heighten your fandom in doing this. So congrats, man. This is cool. I appreciate you.
No, absolutely. And thank you as well. It's been a fun season. The season flew by, I would say, to say the least. It felt like opening day was a week ago, and all of a sudden we're heading into the division series this weekend. So a great season though. And that's what I want to focus on in this first segment, is that heading into the year, I'll be completely honest with you. I was kind of downtrodden. I didn't have a lot of expectations for the Marlins. It was a really rough 2024. We saw a lot of fan favorites leave. There were a lot of new faces that we weren't accustomed to watching and really didn't know if they would pan out or not. And then this team shocked us all. I mean, 79-83 took until the last week of the season before they got eliminated. And I was holding out hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd sneak in. But I think you have to consider this year a success on so many levels. And the first topic we can get into is our favorite memories, as simple as that. And I'll open up the floor to you, Kyle. Seeing the game firsthand, calling these moments, what are some of the top ones for you in 2025?
There's a lot. I mean, I think back to opening day. To me, what made that so special was not that it was Kyle Stowers that was the hero. That was the same Kyle Stowers who couldn't hit a high fastball when the Marlins acquired him from Baltimore, who really struggled, who, if the Marlins DFA'd him last winter, I'm not sure 25 other teams even think about it because it didn't look good. But to do that on opening day, to overcome that struggle that you had the season prior to win the game for your team on opening day, I thought really unlocked a ton for him, and so deserving of an all-star bid and recognition. I mean, just what an insanely good year. Ended on a sour note with the obliques. But I think about Stowers. I think about the walk-offs and all of those moments because it was oftentimes a microcosm of what this team was all about this year. Never giving it bat away. Could be down 2 to 3 runs in the 9th inning and they would come back and win. For being the youngest team in baseball for a large majority of the season, they had a propensity to get big hits late. And you're not supposed to do that these days against these super bullpens and these guys throwing 102. And I wasn't on the long road trip to San Francisco and Arizona, but that one was special. They didn't lose. Bigger picture, like the turnaround that Sandy had was remarkable. Some incredible bullpen pieces we could talk about. Those amazing catches early on in the year at Citi Field by Derek Hill and Dane Myers. Unbelievable. I guess I think about some of those big hits. Oh, Stowers Day in Baltimore. I mean, there's so many, but that's what's awesome. Even in a year where what I thought was interesting, Jeremiah, even Peter said yesterday, I wish I wasn't talking to you guys right now, because he wanted to be in the postseason. And there's expectations, and I think expectations are great. I think expectations will really be placed on this team next year because of what they did this year. But so many amazing memories, man. So many.
You're right. It's I mean, you listed a few, and you can go down the list and spend 10 minutes just talking about one particular game. What comes to my mind immediately is the Stowers Grand Slam at Lone Depot to walk off Mason Miller and the A's. And that's because I was there in the press box, covering, I had media access. And when that Grand Slam happened, I jumped out of my chair and I had to quiet down because you have to keep it professional, but I was blown away. I
Right.
mean, Kyle Stowers and his turnaround was nothing short of spectacular. And I believe wholeheartedly that next season the Marlins have the possibility of having one of the top outfields in all of baseball. You're going to have Stowers in left, Marcy in center. How great was he since his debut? And then right field, there's a lot of options. Griffin Conine, Heriberto Hernandez. The competition that is being fostered within this Marlins organization is, I mean, you can see it firsthand, and you can see these guys want to go out and compete. The other real fun memory I had that I'm never going to forget was that comeback against the Yankees to start the month of August. One of the the craziest game I've ever watched, because they shouldn't have won it, and yet
Right.
just kept battling and battling. And at that point, after the trade deadline, that was the first series right after the trade deadline, to go back home to Lone Depot and sweep the big bad Yankees. The vibes were at an all-time high. That's where everybody was bought in, and you could see these guys love playing with each other. And this team is gritty, they have heart, and most importantly, they prove they can compete.
I think it's some very interesting stuff that you just said there. A lot of and this is just my opinion, a lot of the reason that these guys had so much success this season, and I think Stowers is a great example. Clayton McCullough and his staff, Jeremiah, they fostered an environment that allowed you to be yourself. And I always have to preface this by saying that it's not like it was different before, but some people just click better with others. I think Clayton McCullough and his staff did an amazing job to put these guys in a position to succeed by fostering a great environment for these guys to be themselves, to be who they are, to be outspoken. If there's something they didn't like, something that they wanted to try, something they didn't agree with, it wasn't combative, but it was, let's talk about it. How can we get you better? The one thing that Peter said yesterday that's hard to disagree with, you could find 15 to 20 players who made steady improvement year over year. That's how you know you're going in the right direction. So I think the culture that they built had a huge, huge part to play in the success that guys had individually. Because if you're showing up at your place of work every day for 7 months, day after day, seeing the same people over and over, and you're uncomfortable or something doesn't feel right, it's not going to work, and Peter also said yesterday, and I appreciated his honesty, that this is a team that punched above their weight. They did, and they did that over and over. But again, I think a big reason for that is the culture that they had and the coaching that was there, the people that were putting them in positions to succeed. I know this is very unsexy, but I think you and I talked about this last time. I can't tell you how many people that I spoke with that raved about that traject machine and getting basically at bats against you name it before they actually did it. Like, there's just all of it. And even though they didn't get to where they ultimately wanted to be, in my opinion, this thing got fast tracked so quickly. And I just, and maybe shame on me for saying this, but I just don't think anybody anticipated this coming together this season as quick as it did, and it all coming together, because I think it really started to. And I think that was indicative by the 79 wins, when most people were projecting them to win between 60 and 65. Is that fair?
Yeah. I had them losing 100 games. So I think my preseason prediction was 102, because I looked at the roster on paper and I compared it to 24 and said they're objectively worse. But little did I know, Kyle Stowers was going to play like an MVP candidate. Jacob Marcy was going to come up in August and just light the world on fire.
And
So
nobody knew about Clayton McCullough. Nobody knew about his staff. Nobody knew what those guys were all about. Nobody knew what they were going to teach and how they were going to help these guys get better. So to me, it's all understandable. Going into the year, it would have been hard to argue with, well, they're going to lose 100 games. Look at the roster, how these guys possibly going to get better. And I mean, really, the second half was insane because there were 16 games. They were on a 100 loss pace. That's what's even more special about the season. Like, they were trending towards 100 losses until they snapped out of it. They beat Clayton McCullough. Always talked about that series in Tampa Bay when they went on that long 3-city road trip to Tampa, Pittsburgh, and Washington. Even though they lost the series, he felt like something changed in Tampa, which you could say, well, that's silly. That's a weird. But if you look at the Tampa series and moving forward, they were one of the best teams in the National League for 4 months. So it's so cool. It was so cool to watch them do what they did and watch so many guys get better to the point where you really feel like I guess you don't need to see what you have in them next year. They proved that they can play in the major leagues every day. And I think you're starting to see where, okay, this is where they need to supplement this roster, but there's 5, 6, 7 other guys. This is real.
Absolutely. And I like how you described that these players that they brought in, they don't have to prove that they're major leaguers or that they belong at the highest level. And that's what the Marlins executed perfectly, I think, in this offseason, was winning on the margins, bringing in guys like Jansen Junk, bringing in Heriberto Hernandez, who was a minor league free agent. And we're going to talk about those individual standouts more right after this. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. You pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel gives you so many ways to play. You can build parlays, player props, money lines, or even hop in the action during a game and follow the live lines. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. So whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, really hitting that research for NFL Sundays, Thursdays, Mondays, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. And remember, if your first $5 bet wins, you'll receive $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Back here on Locked On Marlins with Kyle Sielaff. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. Kyle, the Marlins won in the margins. And what I mean by that is they took guys who were essentially overlooked by the rest of Major League Baseball, brought them in to their house, gave them an opportunity, and these guys took the opportunity and ran with it. And I can list off multiple names. I'm thinking of a guy like Tyler Phillips, who was cast off by the Phillies for cash considerations. Jansen Junk, who bounced around the league, the Brewers, the Angels, the A's, never found a home. You have someone like Heriberto Hernandez, who's a 25-year-old minor league free agent who spent the last couple of years in Durham. He gets an opportunity hitting 220 in Jacksonville. Everyone's like, well, why are the Marlins calling him up? Well, they knew something, because Heriberto Hernandez was one of the most clutch players this season. Finished with 10 bombs, I believe. So speak a little to that, Kyle, just how effective this team was at finding these guys and who really stood out to you.
Well, I think there's a lot of folks that helped find these guys, but I think what's really cool is all the names that you just mentioned. Do you take flyers on guys? Yes, but you need to be able to develop them. You need to be able to identify maybe what's wrong to help them get better. I would challenge anybody to go find any other team in baseball that had more success stories than the Marlins this year. Cast-offs that never really got opportunities elsewhere that genuinely contributed to winning in the major leagues. It's all about player development. And I know that people are going to talk about the need to spend money, and I think that can be absolutely true to supplement this roster. But at the core of every single championship team is how do you develop your players? You could look at that with the Dodgers, and I know that there's $500 million that they've spent, or $1 billion last offseason. At the core of what they do is development. And that I think was abundantly true with Peter Bendix, his front office, and the ball club this season. Basically what they did was, we're not sure about this guy in AAA, but we're going to bring you up to give you 4 to 6 weeks to see if you could prove us, I guess you could say, wrong, that you do belong here, right? Prove us right. Why do you deserve the chance to stay up here? Then they got up here. The major league coaching staff just started to identifying where their weaknesses are, and they just went to work. I know a lot of people don't get to see the behind the scenes, and quite frankly, I'm not privy to half of it either. But what I will say, these guys were working relentlessly, tirelessly every day, and it wasn't just showing up 4 hours before the first pitch. I can't tell you how many times I saw members of the coaching staff Uber way before the first bus went to the ballpark every day. To me, that's really the root of all of this. And their ability not only to develop, but the attitude that we want to be servants to these players. And I don't even mean for this to sound that deep, but when you get that type of love and affection shown to you when you haven't gotten it before, and every opportunity you've kind of failed and you haven't really done any, it's just no accident that so many guys came up, and I think you have to have an eye for it, right? I think they identified, we think there's something there, but for so many of these, we think there's something there to come to the major leagues and have success, whether it was, even if you go back to last year, but Otto Lopez, Roberto Hernandez, Jansen Junk, Tyler Phillips, the list goes on and on. Kyle Stowers, for that matter.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I think when they made that deal, Connor Norby was the headliner, right? Connor Norby, maybe we'll get something from Stowers. They've been able to develop Jeremiah, and they just work. They work tirelessly every single day, and they don't give up on these guys, which that's what allows you to win down the road.
Yeah, it does, especially at this juncture in, I don't want to say the rebuild, because I think the Marlins are coming out of the rebuild where they can start adding bricks to the building instead of knocking them down. Because like you said, 2026 expectations, they're going to be present. But the hard work that these players put in, you described it perfectly. I keep thinking of that final post-game interview that Tyler Phillips did after they knocked the Mets out of the playoff considerations. Emotions. He was so grateful. He was happy to be here, and he vocalized it, which is not something I would expect from Tyler Phillips and his persona. Right. He comes onto the mound, he's slapping himself in the face, he's all business. Right. But in that instance, you saw how it truly meant something to him. I think of someone like Javier Sanoja, who is another standout to me. Not necessarily that the stats jump off the page, but the way he plays the game. And he was productive. He would pitch when they needed to mop up the end of the game. He could play second, shortstop, third, center, do anything and everything that was asked of him. And then when he gets a big base hit against the Mets, you're seeing him round the bases just joyful. He's playing with exuberance. And that's what the Marlins had this season. They might not have been the most talented team on paper or the team that had the expectations laid on them like the Mets. But when the rubber met the road and it was the Mets and the Marlins, and essentially that was our postseason. We're not playing after this, but we're going to ensure you're not playing after this because we're playing with heart. And that's what I love so much about this team.
Yep. Again, back to what I was saying earlier, and Tyler Phillips is a great example that you brought up. To be that emotional and not be ready for the season to end, but to be able to that quickly, I guess, get out of that pitcher mode, to feel the emotions of the curtain being closed on a season, but being so grateful for what the organization gave you, and the emotions they let him be him, and they just worked their tail off with him to make him better. You could understand the emotions. And I think a lot of other guys, maybe if it was not vocalized or you could see it, probably felt that way because there was a level of comfort that this organization provided a lot of these players. And You have to. This is a dog eat dog business, man, and people are always after your lunch money, but you do have to hug guys a little bit. You got to let them know, you got to love on them, and you got to let them know that, I know the old cliche, if you get a hit 3 out of every 10 times, brother, you go to Cooperstown in 20 years. Like, you understand where that comes from, because it's just explaining the difficulties and challenges of this and doing it day after day, the toll that it takes on these guys' bodies. It was so great to see. And I hated that the season was over, because I'm so excited about the future.
And we're going to talk about the future and the plan that's in place for 2026 and beyond, because like Kyle, I can't wait for next year. And there's so many questions, but also exciting subjects to talk about regarding next year. That's coming up right after this. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is such a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. All you do is you pick more or less on player projections. For example, you can pick Josh Allen's passing yards or Saquon Barkley's rushing yards, Jamar Chase receiving yards, maybe a touchdown, and you're in the game. PrizePicks is quick. You can set your lineup in under a minute, and there's a couple of really cool new promotions. They have something called stacks. If you want to ride with a player, you can select their pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns all in one lineup for that one player. And they also have the injury reboot feature. So if your player leaves early and doesn't return, it's not going to count against you. So download the PrizePicks app today, use code LOCKEDONMLB, and get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. And this episode is also brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like catching a baseball game live. I can't wait for 2026 and what the Marlins are going to do. And the next Marlins game I go to, or baseball game, sporting event, comedy show, whatever event you want to go to, I encourage you to use Gametime. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets. My favorite aspect of Gametime is the all-in pricing. The price you see is the price you're going to pay at checkout. There's no hidden fees, and you can also see the exact view from your seat before you buy. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. (2026) cannot wait. I'm joined here on the show with Kyle Sielaff, the Marlins TV announcer. First year doing it and absolutely killed it, man. I love listening to your calls, like for real.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. It was
some
fun.
elite ones, because that's what it's about. It's about having fun, and you're a fan of the team, and the way you project that joy and communicate that to the fan base is great. And I'm super joyful and excited because I think this Marlins team, Kyle, in 2026 can legitimately compete. Not just a pipe dream, if we get lucky 2023, but I think the foundation has been laid this season to take that next step forward in 26. What are your thoughts?
And I think what's interesting, when's the last time this team had expectations? I mean, I guess you could say going into 2024, but there probably shouldn't have been, just because it just wasn't built to get back there. And 2023 was fun, but the organization was not built in a way under Peter Bendix where you're looking for sustained success and a real farm system. I think the farm system is as deep as it's ever been. Not ever been in the last 5 years, 10 years. I don't know if you'd ever be able to go back in the history of the Marlins franchise, and I don't even know how you could equate this, but to find a system that's as strong as it is now as it ever was. Like, wow. I think it's as strong as it's ever been. And along with that, I say that because I think there's a direct correlation between the farm system strength and the legitimate players that are expected to come up to contribute and impact the big league team with their expectations at the big league level, because you're going to go through injuries next year. Everybody does. You're going to lose starting pitchers. You're going to lose position players. I would say, I don't know where the Marlins kind of ranked in terms of IL stints this year. I don't know if it was middle of the pack, but they had their fair share. Everybody does. There's freak injuries. So I do think that you think about the Robbie Snellings and the Thomas Whites and the Joe Macks. Heck, Joe Mack, I don't know if he can be the opening day catcher next year. I have no idea, but to even sit here and maybe even have that conversation, I think is great. But the system's as deep as it's ever been. Those guys are going to be needed because there's expectations at the major league level. And I really, after what we saw to end this year with 79 wins and 83 losses, I was thinking about this the other day. I think you should always factor in some natural regression, because Peter even mentioned they punched above their weight. Does that mean there will be a little bit of natural regression? But even if there's a little bit, what is the floor for this team? If you supplement a really nice core by spending a little bit in the offseason, I really believe they will. I don't know anything, but I really do think you're going to see them spend some money in the offseason. I'm not suggesting that's $400 million, but I think fans will probably be pleasantly surprised come spring training that, 2, 3, 4 moves, maybe a trade, this is a nice looking roster. And you couple that with what's in the minor leagues and what's expected to be up here soon to contribute. I think that's where those expectations are going to be, because Edwards and Lopez are good up the middle. Marcy's good in center field. There is a glaring issue behind the plate, but Augustine Ramirez is going to work really, really hard to get better back there. And before you know it, Joe Mack's going to be the everyday starting catcher. Okay. I do think that they could take a look at first and third. Do you want more of an everyday player over there? It's hard to platoon every day, those positions. I think you mentioned that you think they could have one of the better outfields in baseball next year. I agree with that. So I think every team could say, well, we could always be better. We'll always try to get better at every position, unless, you've got Cal Raleigh behind the plate. But every team will always look to get better wherever they can. But I do think that this team will have expectations, because I think there's a lot of these players that are proved that they're capable of doing this for 7 months in the major league. So that's where those expectations are going to come into play. I do expect that they'll spend a little bit. I think you're going to see some veterans on this team to help some of these young guys next year. And I don't know if it'll be the veteran that's on his last year, then he retires. I think it's going to be real veterans with some juice left in the tank, which I think will be exciting. And with that being said, I'm really excited about the offseason and see what Peter does.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And I think it's imperative that they supplement the core. The Marlins are in a position right now where this is going to be the 3rd season under Peter Bendix, and we saw them sign Tim Anderson, Cal Quantrill, and that's it. I guess you could throw Eric Wagaman as a split contract, so technically not a major league contract, but we'll say 3 free agents. I think this is the perfect time to not splurge and spend recklessly, but spend smartly. You look at the bullpen. I think it's fair to say the bullpen could be shored up. You have some exciting arms in the minors. Josh White. You saw the breakout of Ronnie Enriquez, who was probably the Marlins' best reliever day in and day out, and was consistent for Clayton McCullough. He was phenomenal. Get some more depth behind him and Tyler Phillips, who another information here on my end. I think Phillips is going to play a huge role on this Marlins team in 26.
I think they might stretch him out. I think maybe it's simply in the bullpen. Maybe he's the setup guy. I've been curious to see if they tell him to stretch out a little bit, because I actually think he could be a starter, but I don't know.
And speaking of the starters, the Marlins have a ton of them. I mean, at their disposal, coming off of injury, you're going to have Braxton Garrett. You're going to have Max Meyer. The jury's still out on him. Do you move him to the pen? But the Marlins want to make him a starter. At least they did in 2025. You're going to have Ryan Weathers, who hopefully stays healthy for a full season, because when he's at his best, the only thing that's holding him back is health. And that's not even to say the big three, the 3-headed monster of Sandy, Yuri, and Cabrera. So this team's in a super exciting place. I'm with you on first base. Now, this is my opinion, where what they do with Augustine Ramirez, I think they should try to get him to learn first base. Give him a glove and at least try to get him adequate so he could play first base, because I think that's a glaring hole where there's no one direction on the roster right now. You can start a guy 145 games. You'd be platooning all the time. Or you address it in free agency. And I do like third base. Graham Pauley's defense, to me, is one of the most underrated attributes a player in the organization has in terms of skill set. He's an absolute wizard there. So maybe your third base position, if Pauley can elevate his offensive game, maybe it's solved at third because he's just so good.
Can he hit enough? You need at least to me, a real good third baseman in Major League Baseball. You're getting some productivity at the plate as well. Now, to back up on something you said, and listen, we're both fans. You always want your team to spend to try to win. Here's my argument against that the last 2 years. And I didn't publicly say this all the time. Let's say 2 years ago, everybody was like, spend. Okay, and it didn't work out. If people wanted them to spend going into this year, let's say they spent money and filled some gaps going into the season with some veteran guys. That may have prevented the organization from seeing what you had in a Jacob Marcy. Maybe long-term in an Otto Lopez or an Xavier Edwards. It may not have given Graham Pauley and Griffin Conine, or heck, even Kyle Stowers, coming off the year he had last year. Would anybody have blamed the organization if they went out and spent $10 million on an outfielder? Oh, no, you'd say, well, that's got to be better than what we had. But you know what? They gave him a shot. So I say all that. It's not always wise to spend when you're in a situation where you're building, because ultimately, what are you spending for? You might be blocking guys that may actually be a piece of your future. Now, I do think that they're trending here in the direction where this offseason is about what's the word I'm looking for? Like, not the most of importance, but this is going to be, in my opinion, their best opportunity to spend from what we've seen in recent seasons, because that they haven't in recent years. It's allowed them to play young guys that you now believe are a legitimate part of your future and everyday guys. So now you have a pretty good feel for your core players who you can count on every day. Now I think this is the offseason that'll allow them the ability to spend, to start to supplement the roster. They know where that maybe, I don't know if it's a stopgap, but maybe give a guy, X amount of dollars for multiple years. We want you to be our first baseman or whatever. So I think that they're in a fabulous position here, which again, I think is going to create those expectations for next year.
Can't wait to see what they do. We'll wrap it up here, Kyle. It's always a pleasure talking with you, my friend. You do a great job, and thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Whatever you need, man, and congratulations to you, and keep kicking butt, man. I love what you guys do.
Appreciate it. And that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Marlins. Until next time, guys, stay safe, stay locked on, and let's go fish.